in perpetuous Emperor Satan who rules us. Satan God, first among the ruthless, bar the way of these intruders. This fearsome invocation was beginning to spill from the clicking lips of Plutus. But my benign, wise guide, who all things knew, said suddenly to encourage me,
do not allow your fear to grow in the face of this disgraceful, despicable opponent, for any power that he may have won't be sufficient to prevent you descending this slope.
Then he turned to face Plutus, whose face was coated with postulating sores and bloated, and intoned this:
silence, you wretched wolf! Be consumed by the violence of your infected soul! This journey into the abyss is not causeless. It has the highest authority in heaven's fortress, whence the archangel Michael wrought his vengeance upon the rebellious angels he fought with.
And then, just like when a ship sails, inflated and taut in the winds of the gales, collapse and fall when the mast splinters and fails, on hearing Virgil unveil that pagan god withered and fell. So we were able to continue advancing, descending into the fourth level of the chasm, and exploring further into the span of this woeful land that attracts in all bad that ever happens. Ah, divine justice of God, who is it that piles such sufferings on as those which at that moment I did behold? And why do our sins lay such waste to our souls? These thoughts rolled in my mind as I witnessed, moving round the circle, limitless woeful spirits, a churning as vicious as the maelstrom of Charybdis that sucks in and spits out anything that floats near it. Two equally enormous groups of people are there, trudging in opposite directions around the hemisphere, each spirit crying and howling in despair, forced to push a huge boulder much heavier than they are. When two of them crash head on, the weights clash and they can't move. They curse to one another and argue, one shouting, "Why are you hoarding the space I want to pass through?" The other replying, "Why do you squander this part too?" Then they each turn around and commence with pushing their jagged boulder in the other direction, on their way to the opposite section, still shouting about the other's transgression while the boulder rips their flesh, until they would have met again many years hence with and repeated the same routine of invective, and then flipped again to repeat the whole repetitive process. And I, with heart pierced at the sight, couldn't help but exclaim, "My master, could you explain who these people are that we see in this frame? For example, those ones on the left with heads all shaved, were they all clergy when on the earthly plane?" And Virgil explained, nodding his head quick,
"While living they held such a twisted perspective that any money they were blessed with, they wastefully mismanaged and spent it. And the profligate nature they possessed is evidenced in the invective that they yell whenever they eventually get to the end of their section, and crash into those spirits with the opposite affliction." You're correct, many clergy are found in that group with shaven crowns, and cardinals and popes also abound, for avarice afflicts them in astounding amounts.
And I replied, "My master, I am surprised. Given who I've known in my time, I'd have surmised that I'd recognize many of those here arrived due to them being guilty of these precise evil crimes." And he replied,
"Well, you thought wrong in this, for whether they were parsimonious or profligate, they were undiscerning, and because of this, the rock scrapes off their skin, making them faceless and anonymous. These two groups will grind against each other forever, until at the end of days they'll rise from the grave, and this group will have their fists tight closed, whereas these other ones there will be shaved hairless. Divine fairness has taken their ability to be careless, to either hoard or waste, to be avaricious or misers. Their mutual punishment is timeless. I can barely find words to describe it. Behold, son, now if you observe with caution, you can plainly discern this fast that absorbs them is broadly that of committing goods to fortune, for which the human race has perpetually fought then. And now all the gold that has existed ever under the moon or in the stars beneath the heavens couldn't make a single one of these weary spirits stop their unpleasant toil and rest for a second."
"Master," I asked him, "you also talked of some entity called fortune, but I couldn't comprehend. What is this fortune of which you caution, that it grips the world's riches so in its claws then?" Virgil began to talk and say,
"These creatures, idiots still. All you humans are just a pack of imbeciles. What willful ignorance is this that afflicts you out of all proportion? Now I will make you drink my judgment of her, this fortune. The awesome being whose omniscience transcends all things, brought into existence the heavens and created angelic entities to govern them well, so that every part shines on every other part as well, distributing the divine light in equal measure. He did the exact same thing for earthly treasures, which are the equivalent on earth of heaven's splendors. He made and ordained this fortune as the minister, and she was given the charge of a system by which she deals and shifts the pointless wealth and richness from race to race, from those that have to those who missed it randomly, no matter how much humanity craves or resisted. This means that one people triumph with wealth to brandish, while others perpetually languish, seeking at last for fortune's judgment to pass, but it is hidden just like a serpent in grass. All your savvy and smart, all plans that you enter are for naught, for your knowledge cannot stand against her. She foresees, judges and executes her rule at the helm, just as those angelic entities do in their realms. In truth, fortune cannot be reasoned with. There's really no use. There's no placating her sentence, no treaty, no truce. By necessity she must be swift to discern and to deal. So many multitudes must have their turn on the wheel. And this is she who is so condemned and crucified, even by those who owe much to her in life, and should be grateful to her by right, which gives her unfair blame and ill repute. But in spite of this, she is in a state of bliss and doesn't listen to the critics' complaints and whispers. For like the other first created entities, she just gladly spins her sphere and rejoices in her blessed state. But we can wait no longer to go. We must descend now to even greater woe. The stars that were ascending when I set out are sinking low, and resting too long a time is forbidden, you know.
At that moment we cross the circle and reach the other bank near to a fount that gurgles and boils out of the ground, hurling water that curdles into a gully along which it hurtles. The water pouring is far darker than a purple bruise, and forms violent dark waves in turgid flues. That's where we entered onto a rough path that emerges to take us over the body of water, bursting through the harsh mud, where it turns into a sickly bog of stench in the midst, and this depressing sadistic stream where it descends to mix with the mad boiling water that mixed with the thick sludge that slicks around those malignant grey shores is known as the Styx. And I stood on the bank and rubbed my eyes in disbelief, for all around, sprawled in the water I could see people lying, writhing and fighting in the mud-filled sea, all naked and with facial expressions twisted aggressively. They struck at each other with every limb they possessed, not only the fist, but with headbutts and vicious kicks. They choked necks and broke each other's bones with their feet, and gripped each other's flesh and tore it apart with their teeth. At that point my good and calm guide expounded:
Son, now you behold the souls of those overcome by anger, condemned to lie in this shallow cesspool and fight forever. But if you look in the depths, I would have you be aware that underneath them, deeper where you can see no persons, there are a multitude of other vermin squirming beneath the surface. They are down there drowning, gurgling and worthless, and it's they who are spurting these million bubbles that churn this quagmire, in which they're forever stuck without moving, with filthy mud in their mouths. They say we were sullen and gloomy when we could breathe the sweet air which the sun blessed. We were depressed, carrying a stagnant stench in our chests. Thus we condemned ourselves to fester in the slutty perpetually, and they keep groaning this in a droning melody, broken by fits of choking, and they wretchedly weep, for the mud keeps filling their mouths and preventing speech.
When we'd been following this fetid creek for an hour, between the dry bank and the swamp around it, watching these pathetic, mud-eating sinners fight like brutes or just cower, we eventually reached the foot of a tower.